Hello everyone, I'm Nagraj, your Perf Test coach. Types of performance test: baseline test, peak load test, endurance or soak test, scalability test, stress test, resilience testing. We will be learning about these tests in detail in a moment. I have marked peak load test and soak test as priority 1 because we should not be deploying any application into production if these two tests are not completed. So if you have limited time to do performance testing, then make sure you run at least peak load and soak test. Baseline test. The objective of this test is to check the application performance with the initial configurations, that is, before doing any tuning. This baseline test results will serve as the reference point for us against which we can compare the final test results. Try to run test with as little load as possible, that is, without much concurrency. We can run this test with one user and multiple iterations so that the requests will be made sequentially without any concurrency. There were situations where we were able to find performance issues in the application when running baseline test. For example, if there is a missing index on a database column, then even when we run single requests, the response time will still be high. This is nothing to do with the load on the server. Peak load test. The objective of this test is to make sure our application can handle the expected peak load without breaching any of the non-functional requirements like response time SLAs, error rates, etc. If this test is not passed, then we should not be deploying our application into production. Endurance or soak test. Objective 1 of this test is to make sure there are no memory leaks in our application. Objective 2 of this test is to make sure our application can handle the expected peak load for extended duration without breaching any non-functional requirements. This test will validate reliability and stability aspects of the software. If this test is not passed, then we should not deploy our application into production. Scalability test. The objective of this test is to validate how our application scales with increase in load. We should gradually increase the load in small steps like 20 TPS, 40 TPS, 60 TPS, 80 TPS, and 100 TPS and see how the application scales. If we consider peak load as X, then we should also run tests with 1x, 2x and 3x load and see how the application scales. We can run scalability test with or without autoscaling feature, but I would suggest running tests without autoscaling feature first. First, find out the max load one application instance can handle without breaching the non-functional requirements. Then you can add more application instances or turn on the autoscaling feature and gradually increase the load to check how the application scales. If one application instance can handle 10 transactions per second load, then 10 application instances should be able to handle 100 transactions per second load. But not all applications will scale linearly. Stress test. The objective of this test is to check what is the maximum load our application can handle before it can crash. If you want to do stress testing for one instance of application, then make sure you turn off the autoscaling feature. If you want to do stress testing when your system is running with full capacity, that is with max number of application instances, then you can have the autoscaling feature on. Alternatively, you can start all the application instances and then start the stress testing. Resilience testing or chaos testing. The objective of this test is to validate if the software application can return to its normal state after a stressful event. We can simulate stressful events by restarting one or all the application instances. We can also restart the downstream systems and check how our application behaves. We can also configure high delays in the downstream systems and check how our application behaves when downstream systems take too long to respond. That's all for this lecture. I'm Nagraj, your Perf Test coach.